We are all, I think, fumbling our way through parenting to some extent, and generationally so. I think my parents would probably say the same thing. But without further ado, I would like to see and then introduce the three other participants today. Hi, Vikram.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Nice to meet you.
I'm here. Very happy to be here.
Thank you. Hi, Vaishali.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. I'm just recovering from Corona.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Saraswathi.
Hi, Chiara. Hi, Vikram. Hi, Vaishali.
Hi, Saraswathi.
Hello to everybody. Very happy to be here, and I hope I qualify for it.
Before the timer started, I was saying that there is no right path to parenting, and I think we're all sort of to some extent fumbling our way along. So without raising the bar too much, let's begin, because 40 minutes is really a sneeze and doesn't do the subject or any subject justice. But thank you, Nina, for allowing all of us to be here today. And yeah, I hope this is going to be fun. So I don't know anybody here, and you don't know me. And so let's start at ground zero and introduce ourselves. Saraswati, all yours.
Thank you, Chiara. Hi, my name is Saraswathi Laxman, and I used to be a working professional. I worked in the corporate world for over 22 years, and I questioned what I was doing after I had my daughter. And the entire balancing act, if we may call it, between work and parenting made me really kind of figure out what I wanted to do next in life. I took a brief pause, rediscovered myself, and now I'm a life coach and I support working mothers because I believe that the journey for me at some level was a little traumatic. And I just feel that culturally, while we're wearing the pants at work, share the load is an advertising slogan which works really well, but does it really apply at home? So, and I've often heard people say you need a village to raise a child. I had to be fortunate enough to live in a place called ATS Village, where Vaishali also resides. But yes, I took a brief pause. I've changed careers and I'm absolutely enjoying this new phase of motherhood, parenting, and my new career. It's helped me rediscover myself.
How old is your child or children?
I have an 8-year-old daughter.
Same as me.
Lovely. So that's me for now.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Vaishali.
Hi, I'm Vaishali and I'm the health editor with the Quint, and I'm also the editor for our health website vertical called fit.thequint.com. And it's so lovely to meet Saraswati. We happen to be neighbors, or I think we were neighbors. I think you moved to another city right now. And our children, our daughter, like my younger daughter and her younger daughter go to the same school. I've got two young daughters. I've got one 12-year-old and one 8-year-old. I have always been a working mother. I've been a journalist throughout, but I did take about a 3-year break where I wanted to freelance, and I made a few documentaries. So I'm a documentary filmmaker and a writer as well by profession. And that 3-year break that I took was supposedly to spend more time with my children, but I actually ended up working even harder during those 3 years. Anyone in the freelance world will tell you that it's never that simple. So my daughters have always seen me work. They've always seen me, work long hours, travel. They've grown up seeing me completely getting involved with my work and then fighting to find time for them, etc. But they've made their peace with it. They've made their peace with it. And then the fact that we had a lockdown and 2 years of working from home, and then they got to see what I do a little bit more closely. They got involved. They got vaguely interested in what I do. So I think we've all made our peace with it, and we all really enjoy the fact that they really enjoy the fact that they have a working mom. And so, I mean, it's been an interesting journey overall.
Thank you. Before I pass the baton on to the only man, so you're a little bit of a minority today, Vikram. You're going to have to, bear the burden of all the guys out there, because I can see you've got 3 very strong women here. I have a question for both of you ladies, which is that, and this is something I also do, and I think this is very different from how men approach work. This is off the topic. We didn't discuss talking about this, but this is how we have to roll when an interesting idea crops up. And please feel free to interject as well. Somehow, I find myself as well included, we make excuses for when we work. A man never tends to do that. And I don't want to get into the whole mess of patriarchy because that's a Pandora's box. But I heard you speak in a way of sort of why do we make excuses for our girl child, especially? I'm not sure that's necessarily a practical approach, given that everybody's going to have to work in the future. There's going to be no sugar daddies and things like that around. And I wonder when that's going to shift for the real, that we don't, because we're carrying these 2 balls, right? And we're always juggling. And I wonder how it is that in our society, and actually it's a global thing. I sit here in Norway, it is no different. As gender neutral as we'd like to think it is here, it's not the case. The mother always carries the burden of both the home and the work life. So I wonder how you respond to that. Either of you, ladies.
Could you expand on what you mean by making an excuse?
It always feels like we have to justify the amount of hours we spend at work. I tend to do that. When I work beyond my capacity, let's say, and you have to, like I'm a freelancer too, and you stretch yourself. And I find myself, whether I articulate it in so many words or not, I find myself somehow excusing myself and saying, oh, I'm so sorry, but I had to. Not that this is so exciting. This is the reason of my being. This is what keeps me going every day, because you spend a large amount of your brain capacity thinking about the thing that you work in, especially with these kind of professions, right? I'm not sure a man does that. I don't know. Vikram, does a man tend to do that less, perhaps? Is it even fair to put it like that?
A quick introduction.
Yes.
I'm a son, husband, father. My daughter's 5 years old. I've always been in competitive sports and been in the fitness industry for over 30 years, working in different continents. And just to put perspective to your question and very shortly cut through it, I do have to explain to my 5-year-old why I have to work, because for the last 2 years, which were her real memory forming years, we've been in lockdown in Delhi. Otherwise, we were living in 2 different countries, and I would see her only 1 week in a month. because I was practically always on the move. And that has also been the case in my 12-year marriage between two countries where I only saw my wife 100 days in a year. That though it's not a secret to a happy marriage, but that was the life I lived pre-pandemic, and now we've been living together since March 2020. I do agree that there is a challenge and a problem that women always are, either because of certain pressures or because of their own thinking process, find that they have to justify why they work very hard. And why I say this is, my mother was a surgeon, and I was practically brought up by my mother because my father had a very different profession which kept him away quite a lot. So I had working parents. At the same time, having set up and worked in businesses in India, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, and UK, and Australia, I've invariably had my core team dominated by pure coincidence. Invariably, the senior management that worked with me or for me were women, either single, separated, or as parents. And there was always that challenge and that pressure. And I think it's something to do with generation, but I don't think that is coming through now in the next generation or in the last, the generation that's going to follow us as middle-aged people. I don't think they'll have that problem to explain. But I guess people who are right now in their 40s and 50s somewhere are explaining to their children and other peer groups as to why they work so hard. I mean, women invariably have to explain it because of maybe the cultural expectation in the 80s when you got married was very different to what it is now. So I think it's a little bit of a legacy issue. I don't think it's going to be an ongoing cultural issue as I see it. And even children today, I think a lot of children today in the peer group say, but my mom does nothing. So, a lot of people, if they find that their mom does nothing, have a different approach to how to react to their mom's discipline or their mom's value system. There is it's so complicated and it's so layered. So I don't think it's going to be a problem in the future. I think the likes of Kamala Harris have proven that women will be leading, and most of the CEOs in the US have proven that it's going to change significantly. I never had that problem because my mother was my Mount Everest as a surgeon, working 18 hours a day, sometimes delivering 10 babies, and so we were very used to it. My sister's a surgeon, so I see the same thing there. So I don't think it's going to be a future issue. It's a legacy issue. And I think men have also woken up to that. They are no more going to have that expectation. I think there will always be some minority men who say, no, my wife can't work. God bless those women. They will always never have to work. But the reality is they will have to find fulfillment and, quality of life in their mind and their energy somewhere else besides just being parents or a wife. I think overall, I think majority of men also have woken up that if they don't encourage and enable that, then they will not have a happy spouse. Then comes really how much you want to work. Everybody is finding hybrid work situations where you work x amount of hours, x amount of days, weeks, or sometimes flat out for 9 months and then nothing for 3 months. So all those options now exist. So I think we are in a very nice new world where everybody will be able to pick and choose as long as the skill sets and the competence exist. And companies today cannot dictate, no, sorry, we are 9 to 5, which means you have to start at 7 and finish at 8, and it has to be 7 days a week, and you have to respond to an email at 10 o'clock at night. Those days are over because everybody's become emotional, everybody's looking for quality of life, and there's a lot of accountability to that now. And there's a lot of legislation behind it, there's a lot of rules and regulations behind it, and people don't want to work for an employer like that. So the world is, I don't think it's been turned upside down. I think a lot of the shit has been cleared.
Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. Saraswathi, did you want to round that off? Did you have some thoughts?
I completely agree with Vikram when he says that, the pandemic, in some sense, has allowed for balance to happen. I was also hearing some of Ninna's interactions yesterday, wherein there were senior HR professionals talking about how wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness has become a focus in organizations. And that's like a crucial role for people to play. And I also hear Vaishali talking about how being at homes for the past 2 years has also learned her daughters to appreciate a lot more in terms of exactly what is the role that she plays and respect her for doing that. And I think while I worked in an organization wherein it was late hours. I would travel 5 hours from Noida to Gurgaon and back every day. I think it's also a question of the formative years that the child is in, and when they do not see the parent, and we're all living in nuclear families, and when they don't see the parents at all for a large part of their waking hours, or they just see them just before bedtime in the morning, it kind of emotionally has an effect on them. So I believe with wellness being uh, an issue which is kind of taken significance right now, and organizations being sensitive towards that, it's the dynamics is changing and the shift is happening. And I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think women in the corporate world need to apologize that much, because I'm again, working flexi hours, and I accommodate myself as per the convenience of my hours. And I guess that kind of is something that's going to become cognizant more. And with the hybrid model and the flexi model, more and more people are going to focus on that. So,
I hope so. I think there's an element of privilege here with all of us. We speak for a certain demographic of society. So
yeah.
in my mind, I think the spectrum was broader, but I think we're moving in the right direction. Absolutely. So I'm going to move to the next question, which is I want to hear from each of you what has been either the most rewarding or the most challenging thus far, perhaps this year itself, perhaps through lockdown, or the span of your whole parenting journey so far. What's been, and this is a polarizing question, so what has been the most rewarding and what has been the most challenging aspect of parenthood so far? And I'm going to start it round with Vikram this time, and we'll go backwards this way.
I think the most rewarding thing for me has been time with my daughter, and also my father. I have an 89-year-old father who's like a spoiled brat. So I'm actually playing a parent to two different sets of intelligence, different sets of emotions, because at the end of the day, we all need to realize that an 89-year-old is also a child. You know, so I think it's the time. But I think the most challenging thing that I feel that we will all find coming out of the pandemic, and I see this in my peer group who have kids from the age of 18 to 25, is that now that we've spent so much time with our kids, a lot of them have either developed a lot of issues with those kids because they didn't know them so well earlier, and those issues have come up front central and become very confrontational. A lot of them have found a lot of things that they think with their expectations are completely missing in their kids, or some have been very significantly surprised because a lot of parents have also spent a lot of time with their kids, and underlying that is, how do you now go back to the new hybrid normal where you will be getting less time with your child or the child will get less time with you? I think that's going to be a huge challenge. These two things of getting to know your child more for the good or the bad in it, and suddenly having to now have less time with them. We definitely will not find a situation now going forward that we will keep having these 14, 16 weeks of lockdowns where you will all be together and discover barbecue and singing and different games together, or sleep under the stars and watch movies together and get in binge watch sitcom. I think those things will become very limited because people also need to get back. Anybody who's 40 or 50 today needs to find the twilight career for themselves or the next phase of their life right now. And I feel people, even though it's going to be hybrid, will be working harder and might have to work longer for the hybrid where it is work and where it's not work, because it's going to get very challenging. It's going to get much harder to earn the same dollar. I think, how do you make your child independent of you in this scenario when you go back to the new normal, or whatever is unfolding right now is going to be a huge challenge. And what you've learned about your child, or what your child also learned about you.
Mm.
You know, as you said, yes, we have an element of privilege because we all have homes which allow us to have space and internet. The problem with other demographics is much more extreme. When you try and understand, for example, when I during lockdown, because of the fear of COVID, we decided to ask our cleaning lady, don't go back home, just live with us, because she had adult children, and she was fine doing that because she said, yes, in any case I have paucity of space, I don't mind just doing this. In any case, I've worked for you for 10 years, I know everybody, and I finally get to spend time with your newborn who's always living in another country. Great. But when we started encouraging her to go back, the issues that they came up with, that these issues, I've learned this, learned that. So she would stay 2 months with us, go back home for 1 month, come back for 2 months, go back home. So their demographics have different complications. They don't have internet and entertainment to distract them or bind them together. They have a lot more confrontational issues, and I don't think there is any social structure or any mechanism that is dealing with that. That is creating a large number of challenged families and parents and children. Nobody
And
is dealing with
events,
that
things like
conflict.
that. Absolutely.
We all have therapists and we all have forums and we have this forum. We will find solutions. They will not be, there's nobody addressing the unrest that is happening there. I'm definitely not, because I'm not capable of for my mate, but I know that it's a problem for a large part of, and especially people who suddenly went back to hometowns and they've developed a different fear to want to come back or get back into, get back into earning, because they have just got so used to doing nothing, whereas they were the providers for a family. So that's a different conflict. So
Absolutely.
we have much larger challenges, that are coming our way from this. But
Absolutely. Many stories to unfold there. Vaishali, are any of these stories that you're considering in your storytelling world?
A lot, in fact, the mental health crisis that Vikram refers to. Oh my God, we're going to all face a very, very serious mental health crisis. You're already facing a very serious mental health crisis. And while different economic strata have their own respective crises to focus on, and as he said, we still have outlets and help that we can reach out to. There's very little being structured help being offered to that strata of the society, and that's something that the government seriously needs to sort of consider. And when they say that we're going to start a mental health helpline in the current budget, it needs to go beyond that. To get back to your original question about challenges as a parent and the rewards as a parent, I guess one of the biggest rewards has been, as you said, time, and that time allowing me to watch my girls grow up to be really smart, independent women, little girls, let me not call them women yet, but very smart, independent women with a voice of their own. And that has just given me so much pleasure, just getting that time to sort of sit with them and observe them. And even when I don't have time to sort of have a conversation, but just sort of watch them, it's been incredible. And, so that's been extremely rewarding. What has also been very, very challenging at the same time has been the fact that they are living, they've lived a very, very strange life for the last 2 years. And the consequences of this strange existence locked in a house, in four walls, the mental health crisis and the mental health situations that will arise for them as they sort of step back into the real world. That has been challenging already as they start to go back to school, and that's something that really worries me. That's something
Can you
that
dwell on that a little bit more, if you don't mind, if it's comfortable for you?
Well, I mean, you've lived a very protected existence, and you've sort of come into your own at a time where your interaction with the outside world was very limited. So when you go back to schools, when you go back to a school setup, or a social setup, that you're going to face very different sets of emotions there. You're going to face a very different set of challenges there. You've not had 2 years of growing into that culture. You've not had 2 years of coping with bullying or coping with teenage tantrums, or you've not grown up in that environment where other children may have views that are different than yours. How do you cope with that? How do you begin to cope with that? You've not had the time to, and you've not had the time period to sort of experience it. So that's something that really does worry me. I mean, as these kids go back to school and as they sort of begin to get back into the world, they have a very short time, a window of time to get used to it. And so that's something that does concern me.
Thank you. Yes, I can imagine the device culture and the developmental, psychological development happening within a confined space without socialization can really impact the way that they interact with each other or figure out how their bodies are changing or how their perception of the world. I mean, it's hard enough for us adults. I can't imagine how hard it is for them with all their exploding brains and, you know, expanding hearts and finding love for the first time or whatever. Absolutely. Saraswati, on to you.
I think the pandemic has been very rewarding for us, and we're all of three of us, and uh, there's a beautiful friendship that's formed, and I think that's been really nice because we now have a buddy, and we spend time together, we fight together, we play games together, and we found ways and means of interacting, and while we all three of us are very different as people, I think my daughter's kind of created a lovely bond, and it's just great in that sense. So that's been the best part about the most rewarding for us as a parent in this whole journey. I think I will voice a similar challenge that Vaishali has just done from a challenge perspective. So we moved cities during the pandemic, and now we live in Bangalore vis-a-vis Noida earlier. And my daughter goes back to school for the first time tomorrow, and she's been doing online school ever since. So new city, new place, and the school has already started raising a red flag in terms of how kids who are coming back to face school are, there are behavioral issues, and I'm already kind of looking and hoping to work with the school, in terms of trying to address this. And that is the only thing that worries me, because for the last 2 years it's just been literally been the three of us, and she doesn't even have a sibling. So, and we're a new city, so vis-a-vis earlier interactions, and that's limited. So no friend, no brother, sister, cousin, no one to kind of hang out with. So the social skill that she will need, while I'm confident that she will do well, I don't know how she will respond when someone else kind of speaks to her or reacts or behaves in an unbecoming manner. So that right now is something that I'm facing as a challenge. So I have my fingers crossed for tomorrow, and I'm hoping that the transition and the new journey is going to be something that she's resilient and goes through and does well with.
Wow. Uh, Good luck. It's going to
Thank
be a
you.
big day for everybody, all three of you.
Yes, it is, and we are so used to having her around.
Yeah.
It is. It's also challenging for us to kind of. It's literally like a weaning process.
I was going to say, I'm not sure who's more concerned, who is more worried here.
Me.
So I'm going to give you guys my reward and challenge, which I already spoke about when we emailed each other. But I find that when my child is empathetic, and mine is slightly different from the three of you because I live in Norway, which is already like so isolated. I don't live in the city of Oslo, which is the capital, but I live a little further away. So it's like the Punjab of Norway. So it's kind of an isolated environment anyway. So we didn't have the kind of lockdowns that other parts of the world face with children, luckily. Um, but I have a child that's on the cusp of puberty. She's 8 going on 13. It's all happening too fast. I can't keep pace. But that's topic for another time. But I think for me in general, what's been the most rewarding is to watch my child show up in the world empathetically. Empathy, empathy, empathy. Put yourself in the other person's shoes, whatever the situation, whether you said something silly, whether mama did something wrong or right, but just to operate from a space of empathy. And when I see that, I know everything will be fine. And I don't mean that in a very abstract way, but in a very concrete way. Can you figure out why I need you to sit quietly for 15 minutes while I do yoga or whatever? It's that degree of like basic empathy, which I think sometimes privileged children tend to forget because everything is handed on a platter. So empathy is a big reward. Challenge for me has been device culture. I cannot wrap my head around it. Doesn't matter how. I know it's a challenge that all parents face. And I think this, even though we had not discussed talking about it, it's a pet peeve of mine. We can't resist it. And yet, how to surrender to it. It's just such a double edged sword because they're going to need the skills that come with device culture, and yet they're weaning them away from that addiction is becoming increasingly challenging. And I don't think, Vikram, to your point about systems going into place, I wonder if we are standing at a point where schooling and education together, schools and parents together, need to figure out a system of how to address device culture, because I'm not convinced that parents can do it singularly in their own homes. There has to be a larger sort of draconian external force that helps us to do this, because sometimes it feels like I'm losing control in that battle. Which may say many other things about my parenting skills, but I think it's too big a storm that I'm personally facing as device culture. Any thoughts? You're muted.
I just want to say something on the device culture. I read a very interesting book. I haven't completed it. It's by Nandan Nelkani of Infosys fame, and it talks about how to develop a process around consumption and use of the device, and he basically says don't try and avoid the device culture. Develop a kind of a system around the device culture where you very clearly have a device for work or creativity, which is a laptop. If you want to browse, then it is a tablet. And if you want to communicate with somebody, it's the phone. But don't merge all three. That's where the problem is. And he says that, and he's given many examples and flowcharts and research behind it. It's a very good book. I can't remember the name completely. It just got launched about a month ago. And they've done a lot of research in putting that out as to why invariably, if we really pick the top 50 names in anything that we talk about, invariably they have a dumb phone. They don't use a smartphone, but they have a tab and they have a laptop or a PC. So they're not devoid of devices, but they very clearly are using the phone for what it is, so that when it's communication, it is communication. When it is something else, then it is something else. And you can't avoid it. And I can share just one quickly. I went through a challenge of getting my daughter to do mental maths with me, which my wife has no problem getting her to do with it because of the way they communicate. But I was able to get my daughter excited, saying, okay, since you're not willing to focus on me and how I'm trying to get you to do mental maths with your book, let's use my stylus and my phone. I'll write out a number, and you then use the stylus to tell me what the sums are or what the pluses are or additions and subtractions. I had no problem doing that. But it was not that we were letting her watch something or something, but I had to use that device as a tool. And there's a very interesting saying in this book: with a hammer you can break a house down, with a hammer you can build a house. So you have to decide how you want to use a tool, and if you can put a positive process around it, which is more virtuous than vicious, then you will be fine. We can't avoid it. There is no way you can now avoid the device culture. It's of course got many other problems. It's not just a problem of attention span, ADD and all. It's got a lot of physical problems. It's creating a lot of physicality issues in children, and that's a bigger epidemic. I can talk nonstop about it because we've done a lot of research on it as to, why we talk about diabetes, heart, and various other things. Actually, a lot of the medical profession says there's a pill for everything, but there is no pill for musculoskeletal disorder, which is happening in the young generation, and that's happening because of the phone culture. Because you're constantly using your thumb and your neck down, and a lot of children are developing posture issues at the age of 10, 12, 14, which then results that they will never really take on a sport long term because they've already started getting pain in certain joints and muscles are weak, etc. And it's going to create furthermore, cascading issues. So they feel that's a bigger epidemic that everybody is ignoring, and everybody's focusing on all the other things of obesity, diabetes, etc. All those have a pill. All those have a medical cure. There's no cure for musculoskeletal disorder except pain management, which further reduces quality of life. So actually, there are much bigger issues that are there, and 40 minutes will not do justice to it. But to stay on topic, I think there are ways to use that technology as a tool and not let yourself be completely subservient to it.
Absolutely. Thank you for flagging both of those essential ideas. Very, very pertinent. Do either of you ladies want to contribute, or may I move on to the next subject?
Just one thing, a friend of mine used to tell me, and she has older kids, it's like the second you hand a smartphone over to your child, you've lost the child. And this is something that Vikram is saying that the book refers to. The second you have a tiny device that lets you access anything and everything in the world, uh, there's no you've broken all kinds of barriers for that child. Then there's no difference between your child in India or a teenager in Norway or a young adult in the US, because they have access to same kind of knowledge and same kind of other things that are happening in the big bad world of the internet. So I mean, I think that's a very interesting idea that you limit your phone to a phone and communication device, a tablet to browsing, and laptop for writing creativity. I think it's a pretty interesting idea, and it's going to be very difficult to introduce in kids who, for last 2 years, have been told, "Here's your device, and now sit in a corner and attend your school and entertain yourself." So it's going to be tough to sort of implement it with them right now, but it is certainly a interesting way to go about it.
I agree. I think it's radical, and I think it will happen eventually, just the way you went to work to do work, and just the way you used the telephone and you sat down the corridor and you had the black phone and you just made that one phone call, and then you finished the phone call, had your tea, and left, and that was done. And now we're just multitasking all the time and unable to comprehend all the signals coming at us. But I think a time will come. I agree with that thinking, but it is hard. It is hard to. I think children also watch, obviously, us doing that. So I think we are the carriers of this message, like with everything else, unfortunately. So I had shared a quote with all of you, which I'm going to read again because I find this quote to be very powerful, and it's by a writer, an American writer called Jason Reynolds. And I'd like you to respond to this quote when I share it here also with our audience. He says, "You raise your children not to be followers, but then you never take into consideration that one day maybe they will not follow you. And in that moment, you will either be able to stand on your word or you will be made a hypocrite." Saraswati, I'll throw that at you first.
I think that's very beautiful to begin with. And I also feel fortunate that I come from a different world. My husband and I are poles apart in terms of the fact that I'm a South Indian Tamil Brahmin married to a Sardar, vegetarian, somebody who likes his tandoori chicken every day. And I think somewhere I get that from, and I would like to give credit to my father for that, which is about respect. Allow another person to be who they are, make their own choices. And I think that's the example that we've kind of given our child. At no point, because we're polarized in terms of our views, opinions, I come from a different place, and so does my husband. We've always allowed our daughter to kind of have her own choice, make her own decisions. We can expose her to things, but at the end of the day, she chooses to follow. The only thing for us is about saying what is right or wrong. And that also is limited to an extent of something which is like in the broad framework. But otherwise, it's about respect. It's respect for her and it's respect for another. And it's okay to be different. And you can choose to be how and what you want to do and, make your own decisions and choices. And I think I would just respond to that quote with this as my answer.
Absolutely. Living respectfully, do
Yeah.
as to others as you wish to have done
Yeah.
unto you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vaishali, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I would not like to be a hypocrite, but I don't know if I'll be able to keep away from it. It's my honest opinion. Uh, One of the things that I found really rewarding over the last 2 years is sort of watching my kids become their own person, getting their own identity, and being fairly self-assured about who they are. And I would like to believe that that has a little bit to do with our parenting as well, and we sort of push them to become their own people. And so for us to now sort of turn around and say, oh, hold on, I'm not so sure about this, and I'm not on board with certain decisions that you're making, uh, would make us a hypocrite. Uh, I would like to believe when the time comes, I won't be one, but I can't say it with certainty. Honestly, I can't say it with certainty. I don't know. I can't. I find it very hard to speak about it in a hypothetical situation. I think when you come from I've come from a very middle class background, and I have had to work hard for everything I've achieved in my life. So, when you see your child maybe in future not respecting that, or not considering that important enough, would I want to sort of step in and intervene and say, oh, hold on, I'm not so sure if you're making the right decision. Um, I think I'm going to be one of those parents who will.
Thank you for your candor. I think it's really important for all of us parents to see ourselves and see our limitations, because we have expectations. We're loaded with expectations. How can we put those aside? Okay, we have 1 minute left, and I'm going to give the floor to the man in the room.
I think it's going to be an extremely difficult proposition for anybody to one day find that your child is no more willing to agree with what you say, and you'll have to accept what they think, and your thinking and your ideologies tell you that they are going to make a mistake. I think that's a very big bridge to cross. And it's very easy to do that when it's 8, 10, 12, very difficult when it's 21, 25, and 30. And I don't think any parent is going to be prepared for it. I think it's not possible. People are not prepared as friends change and ideologies change. People are not prepared in business world when people suddenly find that your behaviors and my behaviors are not in sync, so we can't work. We let go of in I wouldn't say in the rank and file frontline staff, but in mid management and senior management, you let go of people if their behaviors and practices change, or their way of dealing things change, because they say, oh, they don't fit in. That's called conformity. How do you deal with conformity? I think it's a function of what the risks are. And I think if the risks are, you fall off a cycle, you'll get back on. But if you drive a car into a tree, it's a whole different risk. So I think it's going to be a very difficult challenge, and it's not going to be an easy one. I of course, have very different situations to deal with as a 5-year-old. But when I look at, I've had the experience of this because I've had a good relationship with my nephew who's now completing college in the US. So I've spent a lot of time and effort with him to see how he's become different, and I feel that now I'll have to find new skills and new ways to have a more deeper relationship or a similar deeper relationship on the time I've spent with him up till now. If I don't find that connect and commonalities, I don't think I'll have a deep relationship with him as I thought I would, because of the default of, oh, he's family. So I think it's a big function of, if you don't grow together, you will eventually have a very difficult bridge to cross. And those are very emotional bridges to cross. So I think it's a
Beautifully
very good.
summated.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I'm sorry, but we're out of time. I would love to have this conversation carry on. I think we finally hit on something quite special, and I hope that everybody watching can take this home with them. And perhaps we'll meet again in a year.
Thank you. Wish you all the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.